Welcome back to the second part of our journey. In the first, we visited 25 of Golden Age Hollywood's most lovably dizzy stars, and we learned their great shared secret, that the brilliant performers who played the scatterbrains, the dizzy blondes, and the fluttery fools were, almost every one, sharp as tacks in real life. It takes a very smart person to play dizzy that well. Tonight we visit 25 more of these beloved clowns, and where they rest now. Let's begin, one beloved face at a time. We begin the second half of our journey with one of the most brilliant comic performances ever given by an actress playing a gloriously, hilariously dumb character, a woman who created one of the funniest villains in the history of the movies. Jean Hagen achieved a kind of comic immortality as Lena Lamont, the beautiful, vain, and screechingly dim-witted silent film star whose grating voice and towering stupidity drive the plot of the beloved musical Singin' in the Rain, one of the most cherished films ever made. She was born in Chicago in 1923, and she was, in real life, an elegant, intelligent, classically trained actress with a lovely speaking voice, which makes her achievement as Lena Lamont all the more remarkable. For to play Lena, Jean Hagen did something extraordinary. She took her own cultured voice and transformed it into one of the most gloriously awful sounds in film history, a screeching, nasal, grating New York honk so painful and so perfect that it becomes the central joke of the entire film. The beautiful silent star, whose voice is so hideous, it threatens to end her career when the talkies arrive. It is a performance of tremendous skill, disguised as sheer idiocy, a brilliant actress playing a stupid one with such total commitment that audiences never doubt for a moment that Lena is exactly as vain and dim as she appears. And there is a wonderful layered joke buried inside the film that captures the whole theme of our journey. In one scene, the film's heroine is supposedly dubbing over Lena's terrible voice with her own lovely one, but in reality, it was Jean Hagen's own, real, cultured speaking voice doing the dubbing, meaning that the elegant voice we hear replacing Lena's screech was Jean Hagen all along. The brilliant actress played both the idiot and the elegant woman hidden inside her, a perfect emblem of the secret that every dizzy star on this journey shared. Her performance as Lena earned her an Academy Award nomination, a rare honor for a comic role, and it remains one of the most beloved comic villains in the history of the cinema, quoted and cherished by every new generation that discovers the film. Beyond Lena Lamont, Jean Hagen was a gifted and versatile actress who did fine dramatic work and earned further acclaim on television. A serious professional whose range extended far beyond the screeching blonde for which she is best remembered. But it is Lena, gloriously, hilariously dim, who secured her immortality. Sadly, Jean Hagen's life was cut short. She struggled with personal difficulties in her later years and died in 1977 at just 54 years old, of cancer. In California, her brilliant comic gift stilled far too soon. She is entombed at Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City, California. Her crypt is quiet, and the brilliant comedienne, whose gloriously dim-witted Lena Lamont remains one of the funniest and most beloved comic creations in the history of the movies, rests now largely unvisited, her masterful performance living on as perhaps the perfect proof of our journey's secret. That it takes a truly intelligent and elegant actress to play stupid that unforgettably well. We travel now to honor a beloved and unmistakable comedienne whose brassy, wisecracking, gloriously deadpan characters made her one of the funniest and most cherished character actresses of stage, screen, and television. Nancy Walker was a tiny, powerhouse comedienne whose deadpan delivery, brassy wisecracks, and unmistakable presence made her one of the most beloved and dependable funny women across an astonishing career spanning film, Broadway, and television. She was born Anna Myrtle Sawyer in Philadelphia in 1922, the daughter of a vaudeville performer, and she was small in stature but enormous in comic talent, developing early the deadpan, wisecracking, no-nonsense persona that would make her famous. She made a splash on Broadway as a young woman in wartime musicals, becoming a beloved comic star of the stage with her brassy energy and impeccable timing. And she brought that same gift to Hollywood, where she stole scenes in a number of films with her tart, funny, utterly distinctive presence. She was a master of the comic reaction, the withering deadpan look, the perfectly timed wisecrack, and she could play brassy, dizzy, sardonic, or gloriously exasperated with equal skill. But it was television that made Nancy Walker a beloved household name to later generations in two very different but equally cherished roles. She became famous as Ida Morgenstern, the meddling, overbearing, wonderfully exasperating mother on the hit sitcoms Rhoda and The Mary Tyler Moore Show, a comic creation so vivid that she became one of the most beloved television mothers of the era. And in a wonderful second act, she became known to millions of television viewers as Rosie, the tough, wisecracking waitress in a long-running series of paper towel commercials, a character so beloved that she became a genuine pop culture icon, proof of Nancy Walker's remarkable ability to make any character, however small, unforgettable. She was also a gifted director, working behind the camera on television, a versatile and accomplished professional. And in real life, Nancy Walker was a sharp, witty, intelligent woman, beloved by her colleagues, a consummate professional whose comic instincts were matched by a genuine warmth and generosity. She was married for many years, and was a respected and well-liked figure throughout the industry, far more than the brassy characters she played. She worked steadily and joyfully across an astonishing range of projects, from Broadway musicals to Hollywood films to some of the most beloved sitcoms in television history, and her tiny frame and enormous comic presence made her instantly recognizable to audiences of every generation. Whether she was playing an overbearing mother, a wisecracking waitress, or any of the countless brassy, funny women in her repertoire, she brought the same impeccable timing and the same total commitment, a performer who never gave less than everything, and who could wring a laugh from a single deadpan glance. Nancy Walker died in 1992 at 69 of lung cancer in California, having worked almost until the very end of her long and beloved career. She was cremated, and her ashes were scattered at sea, leaving no grave to visit. And so, the beloved, brassy, deadpan comedienne, whose wisecracking mothers and wisecracking waitresses delighted audiences across stage, screen, and television, left no resting place behind, her tiny frame and her enormous comic talent living on only in the films and the reruns that still capture the unmistakable presence of one of the funniest women of her age. We travel now to honor a beloved comedian whose bulging eyes, elastic mouth, and gloriously uninhibited comic energy made her one of the greatest and most fearless funny women in the history of American entertainment. Martha Raye was a fearless, big-hearted, big-voiced comedienne whose enormous mouth, rubber face, and utterly uninhibited physical comedy made her a beloved star of film, stage, nightclubs, and television across an astonishing career, a woman who would do anything for a laugh, and who possessed, beneath the clowning, a genuinely powerful singing voice. She was born Margie Reed in Montana in 1916, into a family of vaudeville performers, and she was on the stage practically from infancy, developing from the earliest age the fearless, knockabout comic style and the brassy energy that would make her famous. She burst onto the screen in the 1930s, and audiences had never seen anything quite like her, a young woman utterly without vanity, mugging and bellowing and throwing herself into the broadest possible physical comedy, her enormous expressive mouth becoming her trademark and earning her the affectionate nickname, the Big Mouth. She stole scenes in film after film, often playing brassy, dizzy, man-hungry comic characters, and she held her own against the greatest comedians of the era, even playing one of the doomed wives opposite Charlie Chaplin in his dark comedy Monsieur Verdoux. But there was always more to Martha Raye than the clowning. She possessed a genuinely fine and powerful singing voice, and she could belt out a song with real feeling before turning around and demolishing all dignity for a laugh. Her fearless comic energy made her a natural for the new medium of television, where she became a beloved star of variety and comedy, and she remained a popular and cherished performer for decades. And beyond her comedy, Martha Raye earned something rarer and finer: the genuine and lasting love of American servicemen. Like Bob Hope, she devoted enormous energy to entertaining the troops, traveling to war zones across several wars, from the Second World War through Korea and Vietnam, often at real personal risk, and, remarkably, using her training as a nurse to tend to wounded soldiers in the field. The soldiers adored her for it, and she was eventually given the rare honor, for a civilian entertainer, of being buried with military honors. And in real life, behind the fearless clowning, Martha Raye was a complicated, big-hearted, and generous woman whose personal life held real turbulence, but whose devotion to the troops was genuine and deep. Martha Ray died in 1994 at 78 in California after years of declining health. In accordance with her wishes and in recognition of her extraordinary service to the military, she was buried with full military honors at Fort Bragg in North Carolina, the only civilian entertainer accorded that distinction, resting among the soldiers who loved her. Her grave, unlike so many on this journey, is a place of genuine honor, and the fearless, big-mouthed comedienne, who would do anything for a laugh and who gave so much to the troops she loved, rests now among the soldiers, her uninhibited comic genius and her genuine heart remembered by all who understand what she gave. We travel now to honor a beloved comedienne and singer whose warm, funny, larger-than-life personality made her one of the most cherished entertainers of her era, a woman famous for her comic songs and her irrepressible good humor. Fanny Brice was a beloved comedian, singer, and radio star whose warmth, wit, and gift for both comic and heartbreaking songs made her one of the most beloved entertainers of the first half of the 20th century. Immortalized decades after her death as the subject of the hit musical and film Funny Girl, she was born Fania Borak on the Lower East Side of New York City in 1891, the daughter of immigrants, and she rose from the rough world of amateur nights and burlesque to become one of the greatest stars of the legendary Ziegfeld Follies, the most celebrated stage revue of its age. She was a genuine original, a comedienne who could convulse an audience with a broad comic song or a piece of Yiddish-inflected physical comedy one moment and break their hearts with a torch song the next, her rendition of the ballad My Man becoming one of the most famous performances of the era. Her comic characters were beloved, especially her creation of Baby Snooks, a bratty, mischievous, gloriously willful little girl whom the grown Fanny Brice played to perfection, a character so popular that Baby Snooks carried her own hit radio show for years, delighting millions of listeners with the misadventures of the impossible, scheming child. It was a wonderful comic creation, an adult woman playing a dizzy, willful toddler with such skill and such warmth that audiences adored her. Fanny Brice was, across stage and radio, one of the most beloved funny women in America, a warm and generous performer whose comic gifts were matched by genuine feeling. And in real life, she was a shrewd, intelligent, and resilient woman who survived a turbulent personal life, including a difficult marriage to the gambler and con man Nicky Arnstein, with wit and dignity, a far tougher and more complex person than her comic characters suggested. Her life was so dramatic and so compelling that, years after her death, it became the basis for Funny Girl, the celebrated musical that made a star of Barbra Streisand and introduced Fanny Brice to generations who had never seen her perform, ensuring that her name, at least, would not be forgotten. Fanny Brice died in 1951, at 59, of a cerebral hemorrhage in Los Angeles. She was entombed at Home of Peace Cemetery in East Los Angeles, though her remains were later moved. Her resting place is quiet, and the beloved comedienne and singer, whose warmth and wit and unforgettable Baby Snooks delighted audiences across the stage and the airwaves for decades, rests now largely unvisited in person, even as the musical based on her dramatic life keeps her memory alive, the funny girl whose real story proved every bit as compelling as her comedy. We travel now to honor a beloved comedienne whose warm, funny, endearingly flustered characters made her one of the most cherished stars of early television, a woman who charmed audiences across 2 hit sitcoms. Gail Storm was a beloved comic actress whose warmth, charm, and gift for flustered, good-hearted comedy made her one of the most popular stars of early television, headlining not one but 2 successful sitcoms during the golden age of the medium. She was born Josephine Cottle in Texas in 1922, and she won her way to Hollywood as a teenager through a national radio talent contest, arriving in the movie capital with a wholesome charm and a fittingly dramatic new stage name. She spent the 1940s as a busy and appealing leading lady in a great many modest films, a pretty, likable presence in westerns, musicals, and comedies, working steadily without ever quite becoming a major movie star. But it was television, the new medium that so many film actors feared, that made Gail Storm a genuine star and a beloved household name. She headlined the hit sitcom My Little Margie, playing a mischievous, scheming, gloriously meddlesome young woman whose harebrained plots and dizzy schemes to manage her widowed father's life delighted television audiences, a beloved comic creation in the classic scatterbrained heroine tradition of the era. The show was enormously popular, and Gale Storm's warm, funny, flustered Margie made her one of the most recognizable faces on early television. And then, remarkably, she did it again, headlining a second hit sitcom, The Gale Storm Show, also known as Oh, Susanna, in which she played a cruise ship social director navigating comic misadventures at sea, proving that her appeal was no fluke and cementing her status as one of the reigning comedians of early television. She was also, it turned out, a genuinely gifted singer, scoring several hit records during her years of television fame, a warm and versatile entertainer beloved across multiple mediums. And in real life, Gale Storm was a woman of real courage and substance who, later in her life, spoke with remarkable honesty and bravery about her private struggle with alcoholism, writing candidly about her recovery and helping to reduce the shame around a difficult subject at a time when few public figures would discuss such things. A genuinely courageous act that helped many others. She was, behind the flustered comic characters, a strong and honest woman. Gale Storm died in 2009 at 87, in California, having lived a long life well beyond her years of television stardom. She is buried in California. Her grave is quiet, and the beloved comedienne, whose warm, funny, endearingly flustered heroines made her one of the reigning stars of early television across 2 hit sitcoms, rests now largely unvisited, her dizzy schemes and her genuine warmth remembered fondly by the generations who grew up watching her charm her way through the golden age of the American sitcom. We travel now to honor one of the most beloved comic character actresses in the entire history of television, a performer whose put-upon, exasperated best friend became one of the greatest sidekicks in the history of the sitcom. Vivian Vance achieved a kind of comic immortality as Ethel Mertz, the loyal, long-suffering, gloriously exasperated best friend and neighbor to Lucille Ball's Lucy Ricardo on I Love Lucy, one of the most beloved and influential television comedies ever made. She was born Vivian Roberta Jones in Kansas in 1909, and she spent years working hard on the Broadway stage, becoming a respected and accomplished theatrical actress long before television made her a household name. When she was cast opposite Lucille Ball, comic history was made, for the friendship between Lucy and Ethel became one of the great comic partnerships of all time, and it worked so beautifully, in large part because of the genuine warmth and skill that Vivian Vance brought to the role. As Ethel, she was the perfect foil to Lucy's madcap schemes, forever being talked into some harebrained plot against her better judgment, forever ending up covered in flour or stuffed into some ridiculous costume, her wonderful exasperation and her ultimate loyalty, making her utterly beloved. It is one of the hardest jobs in comedy to play, the sensible friend swept up in someone else's dizziness, and Vivian Vance did it with such warmth, such perfect timing, and such genuine humanity that Ethel became every bit as beloved as Lucy herself. She won an Emmy Award for the role, the first ever awarded in her category, and she continued to work alongside Lucille Ball for years afterward, the two women sharing a genuine and deep friendship that lasted the rest of their lives, one of the great friendships in show business history. And in real life, Vivian Vance was a woman of genuine courage and substance who struggled privately with anxiety and depression and spoke openly, at a time when few would, about the importance of mental health and therapy, becoming a quiet advocate for a subject shrouded in shame, a brave and generous act that helped others. She was a sophisticated, intelligent, warm-hearted woman, far more elegant and worldly than the frumpy Ethel she played so beautifully, and her willingness to submerge her own glamour in service of the comedy was itself a mark of her generosity as a performer. Vivian Vance died in 1979 at 70 of breast and bone cancer. In California, mourned deeply by Lucille Ball and by the millions who loved her. In keeping with her wishes, she was cremated, and her ashes were scattered, leaving no grave to visit. And so the beloved Ethel Mertz, one of the greatest and most cherished comic sidekicks in the history of television, whose warmth and exasperation delighted the world, left no resting place behind, her genuine warmth and her perfect comic timing living on forever in the reruns, eternally at Lucy's side, being talked into one more harebrained scheme. We travel now to honor a wonderful comic character actress whose homely, nosy, gloriously flustered busybody became one of the most beloved comic figures on one of television's most cherished sitcoms. Alice Pierce was a beloved character comedian best remembered as the original Gladys Kravitz, the nosy, twitchy, perpetually flustered neighbor forever peering across the street and shrieking about the strange goings-on she witnessed on the hit sitcom Bewitched, a comic creation so vivid and so beloved that it earned her a posthumous Emmy Award. She was born in New York City in 1917, the daughter of a banker, and she grew up partly in Europe, a cultured and well-educated young woman who found her calling not in glamour but in comedy, discovering early that she possessed a rare gift for playing homely, eccentric, gloriously funny characters. She made a memorable splash on Broadway and then recreated her stage role in the classic musical film On the Town, playing the wonderfully unglamorous, sniffling, lovelorn Lucy Schmealer, a homely comic character she made unforgettable, stealing scenes from the film's glamorous stars with her willingness to be plain and funny. It was the mark of her particular genius. Alice Pierce was an actress entirely without vanity, happy to make herself look homely or absurd in the pursuit of a laugh, and she brought a wonderful specificity and warmth to every eccentric character she played. She worked steadily in film, television, and on the stage, a beloved and dependable comic presence, before finding her most famous role as the first Gladys Kravitz on Bewitched. As Gladys, the nosy neighbor forever spying on the witch next door and forever being disbelieved by her long-suffering husband, Alice Pierce created a comic character of pure, flustered, twitchy delight, her wide-eyed astonishment and her shrieking alarms becoming one of the most beloved running jokes on the beloved show. It was a perfect distillation of her comic gifts, and audiences adored her. But even as she delighted the nation as Gladys Kravitz, Alice Pierce was gravely ill, battling the cancer that would take her life, working through her illness with a courage and professionalism that few of her castmates fully understood at the time. She kept the extent of her illness private and kept working, bringing laughter to millions even as she suffered. That she had brought such joyful, twitchy, flustered laughter to millions even while privately enduring a grave illness was a mark of both her courage and her consummate professionalism, and her castmates and admirers came to understand only later just how much she had given, and at what cost. Her beloved Gladys Kravitz remained one of the most cherished comic creations of the golden age of television. Alice Pierce died in 1966 at just 48 years old, of ovarian cancer. In California, her wonderful comic gift stilled far too soon. She was awarded the Emmy for her beloved Gladys Kravitz shortly after her death, a poignant honor for a performer who had given so much. She is entombed in California. Her resting place is quiet, and the beloved character comedienne, whose homely, nosy, gloriously flustered busybodies delighted audiences on stage, screen, and television, rests now largely unvisited. Her twitchy comic genius and her fearless lack of vanity, remembered fondly by all who still cherish the golden age of the American sitcom. We travel now to honor a wonderful and prolific comic character actress whose tough, funny, gloriously exasperated women made her one of the most familiar and beloved supporting players across decades of film and television. Kathleen Freeman was a beloved character comedienne whose expert timing, wonderfully expressive face, and gift for playing tough, flustered, exasperated, and gloriously put upon women made her one of the most familiar and dependable supporting players in the history of American film and television. A performer audiences recognized and adored across an astonishing career of some 6 decades. She was born in Chicago in 1919, the daughter of vaudeville performers, and she was on the stage from earliest childhood, growing up steeped in the craft of performance and developing the impeccable comic instincts that would sustain her remarkable career. She trained seriously and became a consummate professional, and once she found her way to Hollywood, she never stopped working, appearing in an almost countless number of films and television shows across the decades, always in demand, always dependable, always exactly right. She had a genius for playing tough, no-nonsense women flustered and exasperated by the chaos around them. Harried housekeepers, stern nurses, exasperated landladies, put-upon secretaries, and gloriously frustrated dance and diction coaches. Indeed, one of her most beloved roles was as the long-suffering diction coach in Singin' in the Rain, patiently and hopelessly trying to teach the impossible Lena Lamont to speak properly, a wonderful bit of comic exasperation in one of the greatest of all film comedies. She worked with many of the great comedians of the age, appearing frequently alongside Jerry Lewis in his films, a reliable and beloved comic foil whose flustered reactions sharpened every scene. Her career stretched across the entire Golden Age and far beyond it, and she remained busy and beloved right into her final years, introducing herself to whole new generations of audiences. In a wonderful final act, she found renewed fame late in life on the Broadway stage, earning a Tony Award nomination, and as a beloved voice in animated films, her expert comic timing undimmed after some 60 years in the business. And in real life, Kathleen Freeman was a warm, funny, deeply professional, and well-loved woman. A consummate character actress respected throughout the industry for her reliability, her craft, and her genuine kindness. She worked, quite literally, until the end of her life. Her career had spanned an astonishing 6 decades, from the golden age of the studios to the modern era, and across all those years she remained one of the most dependable and beloved character players in the business, a performer whose flustered, exasperated, tough but warm women brightened an almost countless number of films and television shows. That she was working on Broadway and earning acclaim at the very end of her long life was a fitting capstone to a remarkable career. Kathleen Freeman died in 2001 at 82 of lung cancer in New York City, while still appearing on Broadway, working to the very last. She was cremated, and so the beloved character comedienne, whose tough, funny, gloriously exasperated women delighted audiences across 6 decades of film, television, and stage, rests now with no public grave, her wonderful comic timing and her flustered, put-upon warmth living on in the countless films and shows that captured one of the great character players of her age. We travel now to honor a beloved character actress whose fluttery, endearingly confused, gloriously muddled old woman became one of the most cherished, dizzy characters in the history of television. Marion Lorne was a beloved character comedienne, best remembered as the sweet, fluttery, hopelessly confused Aunt Clara on the hit sitcom Bewitched, a role that made her one of the most cherished and endearing dizzy characters in all of television history, and earned her a posthumous Emmy Award. She was born in Pennsylvania in 1883, and she spent the vast majority of her long career not in Hollywood but on the stage, becoming a beloved and highly respected theatrical actress in both the United States and Great Britain, where she was a genuine star of the London stage for many years. She was, in fact, a distinguished and accomplished stage veteran with decades of serious theatrical experience behind her by the time television brought her, quite late in her life, to a mass audience, and the role that would make her famous to millions. As Aunt Clara on Bewitched, Marion Lorne created a comic character of pure, gentle, fluttery delight. The sweet, elderly, well-meaning witch whose spells almost never worked as intended, who collected doorknobs with an inexplicable passion, and who forever muddled her incantations into gloriously confused disasters, all delivered with a warmth and a befuddled sweetness that made her utterly beloved. Her flustered, good-hearted dizziness was the perfect comic note, never mean, never foolish in a way that invited scorn, but sweet and gentle and endearing, the very picture of a beloved, muddle-headed old aunt whom everyone adored despite, or because of, her constant magical mishaps. Audiences took her to their hearts completely, and Aunt Clara became one of the most beloved supporting characters on one of the most beloved sitcoms of the age. It was a remarkable late-life triumph for a woman who had already given a lifetime to the stage. And in real life, Marion Lorne was a respected, accomplished, and dignified artist, a serious and highly regarded stage actress with a long and distinguished career, a warm and beloved figure among her colleagues who had earned the affection of the theatrical world on 2 continents long before television discovered her. The gentle, muddled Aunt Clara was the creation of a skilled and seasoned professional. Sadly, Marion Lorne did not live to receive the recognition her beloved Aunt Clara had earned. She died in 1968 at 84 of a heart attack in New York City, just before she was awarded the Emmy for the role that had made her, in her 80s, a cherished national favorite at last. She is buried in Pennsylvania. Her grave is quiet, and the beloved Aunt Clara, whose fluttery, muddled, gloriously confused magic delighted a whole generation of television viewers, rests now largely unvisited, her gentle confusion and her endearing sweetness living on in the reruns of the beloved show that made a distinguished stage veteran into a cherished national favorite in the final years of her long and remarkable life. We travel now to honor a wonderful comic character actress, whose stout, formidable, gloriously comic presence made her a beloved and familiar scene stealer across decades of film and television. Retta Shaw was a beloved character comedian whose sturdy build, formidable presence, and expert comic timing made her one of the most recognizable and dependable supporting players in film and television across the 1950s and 1960s. A performer audiences knew and loved even when they did not know her name. She was born in Maine in 1912, and she trained seriously as an actress, working on the Broadway stage in both musicals and plays before bringing her considerable comic gifts to Hollywood and, especially, to the booming new medium of television. She had a wonderful gift for playing formidable, no-nonsense, sometimes gloriously flustered women, stern housekeepers, tough cooks, imposing matrons, and exasperated authority figures. Her sturdy presence and her expert timing making her a natural for the kind of comic supporting role that could anchor or enliven any scene. She appeared in a great many films, bringing her formidable comic warmth to musicals and comedies, and she was memorable in classics like Picnic and The Pajama Game, in which she got to display her fine singing voice and her stage-honed skills. But it was on television that Retta Shaw became a truly familiar and beloved presence, appearing in an enormous number of the most popular sitcoms of the era, Forever the Formidable Housekeeper, The Stern Aunt, or The Imposing Neighbor. She is especially remembered as the practical, no-nonsense housekeeper Martha Grant on the beloved fantasy sitcom The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, and she appeared memorably on Bewitched and many other cherished shows of the age, a dependable and delightful comic presence in living rooms across America. She even appeared in the beloved film Mary Poppins, adding her formidable warmth to that timeless classic. Her gift for playing tough, funny, formidable women made her one of the most reliably enjoyable character actresses of her time. And in real life, Retta Shaw was a warm, gracious, and thoroughly professional woman, a respected and well-liked figure among her many colleagues, a seasoned artist whose genuine skill and reliability kept her in constant demand across decades of steady work. She was, behind the formidable comic characters, a kind and gentle person. Across the 1950s and 1960s, she became one of the most familiar and welcome faces on American television. Her formidable presence and her expert comic timing bringing life to housekeepers, matrons, and neighbors on nearly every beloved sitcom of the age, and audiences greeted her appearances with genuine delight. Her stage-honed skills and her fine singing voice gave her a versatility that kept her in constant demand across film, television, and the musical stage. Retta Shaw died in 1982, at 70, of emphysema, in California. Having enjoyed a long and busy career, she is buried in California. Her grave is quiet, and the beloved character comedienne, whose stout, formidable, gloriously comic housekeepers and matrons delighted audiences across decades of film and television, rests now largely unvisited. Her expert timing and her formidable warmth remembered fondly by the devoted fans who still cherish the great character players of the golden age of the American sitcom. We travel now to honor a wonderful and distinctive comic character actress whose sharp, angular, gloriously eccentric spinsters and busybodies made her a memorable scene stealer across stage and screen. Doro Miranda was a beloved character comedienne whose thin, angular frame, sharp features, and gift for playing eccentric, tart-tongued, gloriously peculiar spinsters, busybodies, and cranks made her one of the most distinctive and memorable character actresses of her era. A performer whose every appearance promised a delicious bit of comic eccentricity. She was born in Kansas around 1892, and she made her way to the New York stage, where she became a valued and busy character actress, developing the sharp, angular, wonderfully peculiar comic persona that would make her a favorite of playwrights, directors, and audiences alike. She had a genius for playing odd, eccentric, tart-tongued women, the nosy neighbor, the peculiar spinster, the cranky waitress, the fussy busybody, and she brought to each of them a wonderful specificity and a sharp comic timing that made them unforgettable, however small the role. She became a beloved fixture of the Broadway stage, appearing in many notable productions, and she recreated some of her stage triumphs on film, bringing her distinctive comic eccentricity to Hollywood. She was memorable in the classic comedy The Man Who Came to Dinner and in the beloved film version of Our Town, and she stole scenes in a great many other pictures with her sharp, peculiar, gloriously eccentric presence. She was especially wonderful as tart, no-nonsense waitresses and counterwomen, delivering a sardonic line with a sourness that audiences found irresistibly funny, and she brought that same distinctive quality to television, as the medium grew, appearing on many popular programs. Her angular face and her sharp comic delivery made her one of those invaluable character players whose appearance in a cast always promised a moment of genuine comic delight, a performer beloved by connoisseurs of great character acting even when the wider public did not know her name. And in real life, Doro Mirande was an intensely private woman. So private that even the basic facts of her life, including her true age and origins, remained something of a mystery. A quiet and solitary person quite unlike the sharp, nosy busybodies she played so brilliantly. She guarded her privacy carefully and let her work speak for itself. Across decades on Broadway and in Hollywood, she became a genuine favorite of playwrights and directors who prized the sharp, eccentric, wonderfully specific comic life she brought to every peculiar spinster and tart-tongued crank, and audiences delighted in her every appearance, even as the intensely private woman behind the characters remained a mystery to all. She let her vivid, eccentric work speak entirely for itself, and speak it did. Doro Mirande died in 1975, her exact age uncertain, in Florida, having enjoyed a long and distinguished career on stage and screen. Her resting place is quiet and little documented, in keeping with the privacy she maintained throughout her life. And the beloved character comedienne, whose sharp, angular, gloriously eccentric spinsters and busybodies delighted audiences across the stage and screen for decades, rests now largely forgotten, her distinctive comic peculiarity, remembered mainly by the devoted connoisseurs of classic character acting, who still cherish her every memorable appearance. We travel now to honor a wonderful and prolific comic character actress whose brassy, wisecracking, gloriously hard-boiled blondes made her one of the most familiar and beloved supporting players of the Golden Age. Iris Adrian was a beloved character comedian whose brassy voice, wisecracking delivery, and gift for playing hard-boiled, gum-chewing, gloriously tough blondes made her one of the most familiar and dependable supporting players in Hollywood across an astonishing career of some 5 decades. She was born in Los Angeles in 1912, and she began as a dancer, performing in the Ziegfeld Follies and other revues as a young woman before her brassy personality and her gift for comic dialogue carried her into the movies, where she found her calling as the definitive wisecracking, hard-boiled dame. She had a genius for playing tough, funny, street-smart blondes, brassy showgirls, sardonic waitresses, gum-chewing moles, and wisecracking best friends, all delivered in an unmistakable nasal, tough-talking voice that made her instantly recognizable. She appeared in a truly staggering number of films across the decades, often in small but memorable roles, stealing scenes with a single, perfectly delivered wisecrack, and she became one of those beloved character players whose familiar face and voice audiences greeted with delight even in the briefest appearance. She worked with many of the great comedians of the age, and she was a particular favorite in comedies, where her brassy, hard-boiled persona provided the perfect comic contrast to the leading players. Her career stretched across the entire Golden Age and far beyond, and she remained busy and beloved for decades, eventually becoming a favorite of a new generation of filmmakers who cherished her old Hollywood brass and cast her in a string of beloved Disney comedies in her later years, introducing her wisecracking warmth to whole new audiences of children. Her longevity and her reliability made her one of the great character survivors of the studio era, a performer who never stopped working. And in real life, Iris Adrian was, by all accounts, as warm, funny, and quick-witted as her brassy characters, a beloved figure among her colleagues, a genuine survivor of old Hollywood, whose sharp humor and good nature made her a favorite on every set. She was a tough, funny, resilient woman who had seen the entire history of the movies unfold. Her remarkable longevity made her one of the last great living links to the fast-talking comedies of the early sound era, a genuine survivor whose brassy warmth and impeccable comic timing never dimmed across half a century of steady work, and the new generation of filmmakers who cast her in her later years understood exactly what a treasure of old Hollywood they had in her. She remained to the end, exactly the tough, funny, warm-hearted dame her admirers adored. Iris Adrian died in 1994 at 82 in California, having entertained audiences across some 5 decades. She is buried in California. Her grave is quiet, and the beloved character comedienne, whose brassy, wisecracking, gloriously hard-boiled blondes delighted audiences from the golden age all the way through the beloved Disney comedies of her later years, rests now largely unvisited, her tough-talking warmth and her perfect comic timing remembered mainly by the devoted fans who still cherish the great wisecracking dames of classic Hollywood. We travel now to honor a beloved and gifted comic actress whose warm, funny characters and remarkable voice made her one of the most cherished performers in the history of radio and television comedy. Bea Benaderet was a beloved comedienne and voice artist whose warmth, impeccable timing, and remarkably versatile voice made her one of the most valued and cherished comic performers across radio, television, and animation. A woman whose talent was so great that she was once considered for one of the most famous roles in television history. She was born in New York City in 1906 and raised in San Francisco, and she began her career in the golden age of radio, where her extraordinary vocal versatility made her one of the medium's most sought-after performers, able to play a dizzying range of characters: warm mothers, dizzy neighbors, brassy dames, and comic eccentrics of every description, sometimes several in a single program. She was a fixture of the most popular radio comedies of the age, a dependable and beloved source of laughter whose voice was known to millions even when her face was not. When television arrived, she brought her considerable gifts to the new medium, becoming a beloved supporting player on some of the era's most cherished sitcoms, memorable as the wisecracking neighbor Blanche Morton on The George Burns and Gracie Allen Show, sharing the screen with the great Gracie Allen herself, one dizzy character genius supporting another. She was so gifted and so beloved that she was reportedly considered for the role of Ethel Mertz on I Love Lucy, a part that went instead to Vivian Vance, and one can only imagine the different history that might have followed. She also lent her wonderful voice to animation, most famously as the original voice of Betty Rubble on the beloved cartoon The Flintstones, enchanting a generation of children. And then, late in her career, she found her greatest fame of all, starring as Kate Bradley, the warm, sensible, good-humored matriarch at the center of the hugely popular sitcom Petticoat Junction, a role that made her, at last, a beloved leading lady and a household name after decades of brilliant supporting work. And in real life, Bea Benaderet was a warm, generous, and deeply professional woman, beloved by her many colleagues across every medium she graced, a consummate artist whose genuine kindness matched her enormous talent. She was a devoted mother and a respected veteran whose remarkable versatility had sustained one of the great character careers of her age. Bea Benaderet died in 1968 at 62 of cancer in California. At the height of her Petticoat Junction fame, her warm and versatile gifts stilled far too soon. She is entombed at Valhalla Memorial Park in North Hollywood, California. Her crypt is quiet, and the beloved comedian and voice artist, whose warm, funny characters and remarkably versatile voice delighted audiences across radio, television, and animation, rests now largely unvisited. Her impeccable timing and her genuine warmth remembered fondly by the devoted fans who still cherish the golden age of American comedy that she helped, in 1,000 voices, to define. We travel now to honor a wonderful and spirited comic actress whose bubbly, accented, gloriously flirtatious characters made her a delightful and beloved presence in the comedies of the golden age. Fifi Dorsey was a beloved comic actress who built an entire delightful career on playing the bubbly, flirtatious, gloriously exaggerated French coquette, all fluttering charm and playful accent, a comic persona so beloved that it carried her across film, vaudeville, and the stage for decades, in a wonderful bit of showbiz irony, for she was not French at all. She was born Marie-Rose Angelina Yvonne Lucier in Montreal, Canada, in 1904, a French-Canadian girl who transformed herself into the very picture of the saucy Parisian mademoiselle, adopting a stage name and a bubbly, exaggerated French persona that delighted American audiences, who never guessed she had never set foot in France until well into her fame. It was, in its own way, a perfect example of the comic invention that runs through this whole journey. A clever performer creating a beloved character wholesale and playing it to the hilt. She rose to fame in the late 1920s and early 1930s, becoming a popular comic presence in a string of films where her flirtatious charm, her playful accent, and her bubbly energy made her a delightful foil and a beloved comic personality. She played the saucy French girl, the flirtatious coquette, the bubbly continental charmer, always with a wonderful, playful energy and a knowing wink, and audiences adored the good-humored, exaggerated fun of her performances. Her fame in films eventually faded, as it did for so many, but Fifi d'Orsay's spirited charm never dimmed, and she enjoyed a long career in vaudeville, nightclubs, and on the stage, remaining a beloved and energetic performer for decades. In a wonderful late-career triumph, she returned to the Broadway stage in her later years in the celebrated musical Follies, a nostalgic show about the very kind of former showgirls she had once been, earning acclaim and reminding audiences of the spirited charm that had made her a favorite so many years before. And in real life, Fifi d'Orsay was a warm, funny, spirited woman, a genuine survivor of old Hollywood whose good humor and energy never faded, a French-Canadian girl who had cheerfully spent a lifetime playing a French woman and had charmed audiences on both sides of the deception. She was beloved by those who knew her for her warmth and her irrepressible spirit. Her long and spirited career, stretching from the silent era through her triumphant late return to Broadway, was a testament to the irrepressible charm and energy that had made her a favorite in the first place, and audiences across the generations delighted in the bubbly, flirtatious warmth she brought to every performance. That a French-Canadian girl had cheerfully spent a lifetime as the toast of Paris and charmed everyone in the doing of it was the most delightful joke of all. Fifi d'Orsay died in 1983 at 78 in California, having entertained audiences for more than half a century. She is buried in California. Her grave is quiet, and the beloved comic charmer, whose bubbly, flirtatious, gloriously exaggerated French coquette delighted audiences across film, vaudeville, and the stage for decades, rests now largely unvisited. Her spirited energy and her good-humored comic invention, remembered mainly by the devoted fans, who still cherish the delightful comic personalities of Hollywood's golden age. We travel now to honor a wonderful and distinctive character actress whose tall, gaunt, gloriously grim presence made her a memorable and beloved comic foil across decades of film and television. Minerva Urekel was a beloved character actress whose tall, gaunt frame, severe features, and gloriously grim, forbidding presence made her a memorable and instantly recognizable comic foil in a great many films and television programs. A performer who specialized in playing stern housekeepers, forbidding landladies, grim spinsters, and imposing eccentrics with a wonderful deadpan menace that made her a favorite in comedies of every kind. She was born in Nevada in 1894, and her very stage surname was said to be drawn from the town of Eureka, California, spelled backwards, a fittingly eccentric touch for a woman who would specialize in the eccentric and the grim. She trained and worked in the theater before bringing her distinctive presence to Hollywood, where her tall, severe, forbidding appearance made her a natural for a particular and beloved kind of comic role. The grim housekeeper, the stern matron, the forbidding landlady, the spooky eccentric, all played with a wonderful deadpan seriousness that made them irresistibly funny. She appeared in a truly enormous number of films across the decades, often in small but memorable roles. Her grim, imposing presence, providing the perfect comic contrast in mysteries, comedies, and horror spoofs alike, a dependable source of deadpan menace that audiences delighted in. She was especially at home in the comic spooky films of the era, where her forbidding presence could be played for both chills and laughs, and she became a familiar and beloved face to the audiences of the 1940s and 1950s. When television arrived, she brought her distinctive gifts to the new medium, appearing on many popular programs and even landing recurring roles, her grim comic presence as effective on the small screen as it had been in the movies. Her tall, gaunt figure and her deadpan severity made her one of those invaluable character players whose every appearance promised a moment of genuine comic delight. And in real life, Minerva Urekel was, by the accounts of those who knew her, a warm and gracious woman quite unlike the grim, forbidding eccentrics she played so memorably, a seasoned and dependable professional beloved by her colleagues for her reliability and her good nature. The grim housekeepers were the creation of a kind and capable artist, Across the 1940s and 1950s, she became one of the most familiar faces in the movies. Her tall, gaunt, forbidding presence, turning up in comedy after comedy and mystery after mystery, always promising a moment of gloriously deadpan menace. And she carried that same distinctive gift into television as the new medium grew. Audiences delighted in her grim, imposing eccentrics, never guessing at the warm and gracious woman behind the forbidding mask. Minerva Uricale died in 1966 at 71 of a heart ailment in California, having enjoyed a long and busy career. She is buried in California. Her grave is quiet, and the beloved character actress, whose tall, gaunt, gloriously grim housekeepers and matrons delighted audiences across decades of film and television, rests now largely forgotten. Her deadpan menace and her distinctive comic presence, remembered mainly by the devoted connoisseurs of classic character acting who still cherish her every memorable and forbidding appearance. We travel now to honor a beloved and gifted comic actress whose brassy, wisecracking, gloriously good-hearted blondes made her one of the most cherished and enduring funny women in the history of Hollywood. Joan Blondell was a beloved comedienne whose brassy warmth, wisecracking delivery, and gift for playing tough, funny, good-hearted working girls made her one of the most cherished and dependable comic stars of the Golden Age. A performer whose enormous, expressive eyes and quick wit lit up film after film across a career of some 5 decades. She was born in New York City in 1906, into a vaudeville family, and she was on the stage practically from infancy, developing the brassy, warm, wisecracking persona that would make her a beloved star. She came to Hollywood at the dawn of the sound era and quickly became one of the definitive faces of the fast-talking Warner Brothers comedies of the 1930s, playing wisecracking chorus girls, tough but tender working women, and brassy best friends, often paired with her friend Glenda Farrell, the two of them trading rapid-fire wisecracks in a beloved series of comedies. Her warmth, her humor, and her genuine likability made her a favorite of Depression-era audiences who saw in her tough, funny, good-hearted working girls a reflection of their own resilience and hope. She could deliver a wisecrack with the best of them, but there was always a warmth and a vulnerability beneath the brass that made audiences love her, and she brought that quality to a great many films across the decade, a beloved and reliable star. And unlike so many stars of her era, Joan Blondell's career endured for decade after decade. She gracefully made the transition to character roles as she aged, becoming a beloved and respected supporting player, and she earned an Academy Award nomination for her fine dramatic work in The Blue Veil, proving that her gifts extended well beyond comedy. She worked steadily and beloved right into her final years, a genuine survivor of old Hollywood whose talent never dimmed. And in real life, Joan Blondell was a warm, funny, resilient, and hardworking woman who navigated a turbulent personal life, including marriages to some difficult men, with wit and grit, a tough and generous survivor, beloved by her colleagues and admired for her professionalism and her genuine warmth. She was, behind the brassy comic characters, exactly as good-hearted as her admirers hoped. She was, by the end, one of the last great survivors of the early sound era, a beloved link to the fast-talking Warner Brothers comedies that had made her famous half a century before. And she had earned across those decades not only the affection of audiences but the deep respect of the industry for her professionalism, her range, and her enduring warmth. Her tough, funny, good-hearted working girls had come to embody the resilience and hope of an entire era. Joan Blondell died in 1979 at 73 of leukemia in California, having worked almost until the very end of her long and beloved career. She is entombed at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. Her crypt is quiet, and the beloved comedienne, whose brassy, wisecracking, gloriously good-hearted working girls delighted audiences across some 5 decades of Hollywood history, rests now largely unvisited. Her quick wit and her genuine warmth remembered fondly by the devoted fans who still cherish the great wisecracking women of the Golden Age. We travel now to honor one of the greatest comediennes of the silent era, a woman who was among the most beloved, funny women in the world before scandal and tragedy destroyed her, and whose dizzy, madcap charm helped invent screen comedy itself. Mabel Normand was one of the most brilliant and beloved comediennes in the entire history of the movies. A madcap, spirited, gloriously funny performer who was, in the earliest days of the cinema, one of the biggest stars in the world, a pioneer of screen comedy whose gifts rivaled those of Chaplin himself. She was born in New York in 1892 or 1893, and she came up as an artist's model before entering the brand new world of the movies, where her extraordinary natural gift for physical comedy and her irresistible, spirited charm made her a sensation almost overnight. She became the queen of the Keystone comedies, the madcap slapstick films that helped define screen comedy in its infancy. And she was not merely a performer, but a genuine pioneer, one of the first women to write and direct her own films, a creative force of real vision and ambition at a time when the industry was still inventing itself. She was beloved by audiences around the world for her spirited, dizzy, madcap heroines, and she was a close collaborator and friend of Charlie Chaplin, whom she helped to guide in his early days, and of the comedy pioneer Mack Sennett. At the height of her fame, Mabel Normand was one of the most popular and beloved women in the world, a genuine comic genius who had helped invent an art form. But her life was shadowed by tragedy and scandal. Her health was fragile, undermined by tuberculosis, and her name became entangled, however innocently, in a series of devastating Hollywood scandals, including the notorious unsolved murder of the director William Desmond Taylor, a scandal that, though she was never accused of any crime, badly damaged her reputation in an era of moral panic about the movies. The scandals and her declining health destroyed her career, and the beloved madcap comedienne faded from the screen. Her loss was mourned deeply by those who had known her genius, the friends and collaborators who understood that one of the true pioneers of screen comedy, a woman who had helped invent the very art form, had been taken far too soon and treated far too cruelly by scandal and circumstance. She had been, at her height, one of the funniest and most beloved women in the world, and her spirited, madcap brilliance had shaped the comedy that followed. Mabel Normand died in 1930 at just 37 years old, of tuberculosis, in a sanatorium in California. Her brilliant career and her spirited life cut tragically short. She is entombed at Calvary Cemetery in East Los Angeles. Her crypt is quiet, and one of the greatest and most beloved comediennes in the history of the movies. A madcap genius who helped invent screen comedy and who was undone by scandal and illness, rests now largely forgotten, her spirited, dizzy, madcap brilliance living on only in the surviving silent films that still capture the irresistible charm of a woman who was, once, one of the funniest and most beloved people in the world. We travel now to honor one of the finest character actresses in the history of Hollywood, a woman whose sharp, funny, gloriously wisecracking working-class women earned her more Academy Award nominations than almost any character player of her age. Thelma Ritter was a beloved character actress whose tart, wisecracking, gloriously down-to-earth working-class women, delivered in an unmistakable Brooklyn accent, made her one of the most cherished and respected supporting players in the history of the movies, a performer so gifted that she earned 6 Academy Award nominations, a remarkable achievement for a character actress. She was born in Brooklyn in 1902, and she trained seriously as an actress before family responsibilities delayed her career, so that she did not achieve real film success until she was already in her 40s, a late bloomer whose genuine talent, once discovered, made her indispensable. Once Hollywood recognized what it had in her, Thelma Ritter became one of the most beloved and dependable character actresses in the business, specializing in playing sharp, funny, world-weary, gloriously down-to-earth working women, wisecracking maids, tart-tongued nurses, skeptical friends, and no-nonsense mothers, all delivered with an unmistakable Brooklyn tartness and a perfect comic timing that could steal any scene. But there was always more to her characters than mere comedy. Thelma Ritter brought a genuine humanity, a warmth, and a hard-won wisdom to her working-class women that made them feel utterly real, and it was that combination of comedy and truth that earned her the respect of the industry and those 6 Oscar nominations. She was unforgettable in a string of classic films, bringing her tart warmth to All About Eve, Rear Window, in which she played the wisecracking, wise nurse, Pillow Talk, and many more. Always the sharp, funny, deeply human presence who saw through everyone's nonsense and delivered the truth with a Brooklyn wisecrack. She was, by common consent, one of the finest character actresses ever to work in the movies, a performer whose seemingly effortless naturalism concealed enormous skill. And in real life, Thelma Ritter was a warm, intelligent, dignified, and thoroughly professional woman. A devoted wife and mother whose late-blooming success never went to her head, beloved and respected throughout the industry for her talent and her genuine decency. She was, by the time of her death, one of the most beloved and respected character actresses in the entire history of the movies, a performer whose 6 Academy Award nominations placed her among the most honored supporting players who ever lived, and whose seemingly effortless naturalism made her a model that generations of actors would study and admire. Her tart, warm, deeply human working women had become an indelible part of American film. Thelma Ritter died in 1969 at 66 of a heart attack in New York City. Her wonderful gifts stilled while she was still working. She is buried in New York. Her grave is quiet, and the beloved character actress, whose tart, wisecracking, gloriously human working-class women earned her 6 Academy Award nominations and the lasting respect of her peers, rests now largely unvisited. Her Brooklyn wit and her deep humanity, remembered fondly by all who cherish the great character players of classic Hollywood. We travel now to honor a wonderful and distinctive character actress whose imperious, formidable, gloriously grand dowagers made her a memorable comic presence across the golden age of the screen. Kathleen Howard was a beloved character actress who specialized in playing imperious, formidable, gloriously overbearing wives and dowagers, most memorably as the domineering, henpecking wife who made life a comic misery for the great W.C. Fields, a formidable comic presence whose grand manner concealed a genuinely remarkable and accomplished life. She was born in Canada in 1884, and here is the wonderful truth beneath the formidable comic characters. Before she ever appeared in a Hollywood film, Kathleen Howard had already lived an entire distinguished career as a genuine opera singer, a celebrated contralto who performed for years at the Metropolitan Opera in New York, one of the most prestigious opera houses in the world. She was a serious and accomplished artist of real cultivation, a professional opera singer, and even an author and fashion editor, a woman of genuine sophistication and achievement, which makes her comic dowagers all the more delightful. When she came to Hollywood in middle age, she brought that grand operatic bearing to a series of formidable, imperious comic matrons, and she found her greatest fame as the domineering wife of W.C. Fields in his classics It's a Gift and The Man on the Flying Trapeze, playing the henpecking, overbearing spouse whose constant nagging drives the put-upon Fields to comic despair. It was a perfect pairing, her grand, formidable manner providing the ideal foil for Fields's muttering, long-suffering everyman, and audiences delighted in the comic warfare between them. She brought that same imperious comic grandeur to a great many other films, always the formidable, overbearing, gloriously grand dowager, a wonderful and memorable comic presence. And so, once again, we find the familiar secret of this journey. The formidable comic dowager was played by a woman of genuine cultivation and remarkable accomplishment, an acclaimed opera singer and author who brought real artistry and a knowing wit to her comic matrons. Kathleen Howard was far grander in reality than any dowager she played. It was a remarkable double life, and few of the moviegoers who laughed at her henpecking comic wives ever guessed that the formidable woman on the screen had once filled the great opera houses with her voice, a genuine artist of the highest cultivation who had simply found, in middle age, a delightful second calling in comedy. She brought that same discipline and artistry to her comic matrons that she had once brought to the operatic stage. Kathleen Howard died in 1956 at 71, in California, having enjoyed 2 distinguished careers, in opera and in film. She is buried in California. Her grave is quiet, and the beloved character actress, whose imperious, formidable, gloriously grand dowagers delighted audiences across the golden age of screen comedy, rests now largely forgotten. Her memorable comic matrons and her remarkable operatic past, remembered mainly by the devoted connoisseurs of classic Hollywood who still cherish the great character players of the era. We travel now to honor a beloved and prolific character actress whose sweet, gentle, and sometimes gloriously dithering aunts and mothers made her a familiar and cherished presence across the golden age of the screen. Sarah Hayden was a beloved character actress whose gentle, kindly, sometimes sweetly dithering spinster aunts and soft-spoken mothers made her a familiar and reassuring presence in a great many films across the 1930s and 1940s. Most beloved as the sweet, gentle Aunt Millie, in the enormously popular Andy Hardy film series. She was born in Texas in 1899, the daughter of an actress, and she grew up in the world of the theater, developing into a capable and versatile performer before bringing her gentle gifts to Hollywood in the sound era. Once there, she found her niche playing kindly, soft-spoken, gentle women, sweet spinster aunts, patient mothers, gentle teachers, and quiet companions. Her soft manner and her genuine warmth making her a reassuring and beloved presence in film after film. She specialized in a particular and valuable kind of character, the gentle, self-effacing, sometimes sweetly dithering woman whose quiet kindness anchored many a scene, and she brought a real tenderness and truth to these roles that audiences responded to. Her most beloved role was as Aunt Millie in the hugely popular Andy Hardy series, the wholesome, warm-hearted films about small-town American family life that were among the most beloved and profitable of their era. As the gentle, kindly Aunt Millie, a member of the beloved Hardy household, Sarah Hayden became a familiar and cherished figure to millions of moviegoers who followed the Hardy family's adventures across many films. Her quiet warmth, an essential part of the series' wholesome appeal. She brought that same gentle presence to a great many other films, always the sweet, soft-spoken, kindly woman whose warmth lit the corners of the story. And in real life, Sarah Hayden was a private, dignified, and thoroughly professional woman, a capable and respected character actress, who brought genuine skill and warmth to her gentle roles across a long and steady career, quietly beloved by her colleagues. Across a long and steady career, she became one of those quietly essential character players whose gentle warmth anchored countless films, a performer audiences trusted and loved even when they did not know her name. And her beloved Aunt Millie remained a cherished figure to the millions who had grown up following the wholesome adventures of the Hardy family. Her quiet, self-effacing warmth was a genuine gift, and she gave it generously across decades of work. Sarah Hayden died in 1981, at 82, in California, having enjoyed a long life well beyond her years of screen work. She is buried in California. Her grave is quiet, and the beloved character actress, whose gentle, kindly, sometimes sweetly dithering aunts and mothers delighted audiences across the golden age of the screen, rests now largely forgotten. Her quiet warmth and her beloved Aunt Millie, remembered mainly by the devoted fans who still cherish the wholesome family films and the great gentle character women of classic Hollywood. We travel now to honor one of the most beloved character actresses in the history of the movies. A woman who played the most famous witch in all of cinema and who was, in real life, one of the gentlest and kindest souls in Hollywood. Margaret Hamilton achieved a kind of immortality unlike any other on this journey, for she created the Wicked Witch of the West in The Wizard of Oz, one of the most famous and frightening villains in the entire history of the movies, and yet the woman behind that cackling green face was, by every single account, one of the sweetest, gentlest, and most beloved people ever to work in Hollywood. She was born in Cleveland, Ohio, in 1902, and before she ever became an actress, she trained and worked as a kindergarten teacher, a vocation that speaks to the gentle, nurturing nature that everyone who knew her recognized. She loved children her whole life, and she brought that same warmth to her career even as she made her name playing sharp, tart, and sometimes frightening characters. She became a busy and respected character actress, often cast as spinsters, gossips, housekeepers, and sharp-tongued women, her angular features and her distinctive voice making her a memorable presence in film after film. And then came the role that would define her forever, the Wicked Witch of the West, whom she played with such gleeful, cackling, green-faced menace that she terrified generations of children and created one of the most iconic villains in movie history. The role was genuinely dangerous to play. She was badly burned during the filming of one of the witch's fiery exits, a serious injury she bore with characteristic good grace. And here is the wonderful, defining irony of Margaret Hamilton's life, the perfect capstone to our whole journey. The woman who played the most frightening witch in the movies spent the rest of her life gently reassuring frightened children that the witch was only make-believe, that she herself was not scary at all, and that she was really very nice. She made warm, kindly appearances on children's television programs, including a famous visit to Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, precisely to show children the gentle woman behind the terrifying mask. She was, in truth, a beloved, warm, community-minded woman, a devoted mother, a Sunday school teacher, and a serious advocate for public education and animal welfare. about as far from a wicked witch as any human being could possibly be. Margaret Hamilton died in 1985 at 82 of a heart attack in Connecticut. She was cremated, and her ashes were scattered, leaving no grave to visit. And so the beloved character actress, who played the most frightening witch in the history of the movies, and who was in life one of the gentlest and kindest souls in all of Hollywood, left no resting place behind, her cackling green villain terrifying children forever in the beloved classic, even as the sweet, gentle, kindly woman behind the mask remains the truest and most beautiful proof of the secret at the heart of this entire journey. That the people who played the villains and the fools and the frightening witches were so often the very finest and gentlest souls of all. We travel now to honor a wonderful and gifted actress whose warm, funny, and gloriously blowsy comic characters made her one of the most cherished character players of the Golden Age, a two-time Academy Award nominee. Marjorie Rambeau was a beloved character actress whose warm, earthy, gloriously blowsy comic women made her one of the most respected and cherished supporting players of her era, a performer so gifted that she earned 2 Academy Award nominations for her wonderful, larger-than-life character work. She was born in San Francisco in 1889, and she was a genuine child of show business, performing from an early age and becoming a celebrated leading lady of the Broadway stage in her youth, a real star of the theater long before Hollywood claimed her. She brought decades of genuine theatrical craft to her film career, and when she settled into character roles in middle age, she found her truest calling, playing warm, funny, earthy, sometimes blowsy and dissipated but always deeply human women, faded showgirls, tough but tender mothers, good-hearted barflies, and worldly women who had seen it all. She brought such warmth, such humor, and such genuine humanity to these characters that she earned the deep respect of the industry and 2 Oscar nominations. For her fine work in the films Primrose Path and Torch Song, her gift was for finding the comedy and the heartbreak in her worldly, larger-than-life women, playing them with a warmth and a truth that made even the most blowsy character sympathetic and real. She was a wonderful and versatile performer, equally at home in comedy and drama, and she brought her earthy warmth to a great many films across the Golden Age, a beloved and respected presence. And in real life, Marjorie Rambeau was a resilient and courageous woman who overcame serious injury and personal hardship to sustain a long career, a warm, witty, and genuine person beloved by her colleagues, far more dignified and accomplished than the blowsy women she so often and so beautifully played. She was a seasoned professional whose real artistry underlay every one of her larger-than-life characters. She was, in her prime, one of the most respected character actresses in the business, a performer whose combination of comic warmth and genuine dramatic depth set her apart and earned her the admiration of directors and fellow actors alike. Across a career that spanned the Broadway stage and the golden age of the screen, she brought the same generous humanity to every one of her larger-than-life women, and her 2 Oscar nominations were a fitting recognition of a rare and lasting talent. Marjorie Rambeau died in 1970 at 80, in California, having enjoyed a long and distinguished career on stage and screen. She is buried in California. Her grave is quiet, and the beloved character actress, whose warm, funny, gloriously blowsy comic women earned her 2 Academy Award nominations and the lasting respect of her peers, rests now largely forgotten. Her earthy warmth and her deep humanity remembered mainly by the devoted connoisseurs of classic Hollywood who still cherish the great character players of the Golden Age. We travel now to honor a wonderful and distinctive character actress whose blowsy, brassy, gloriously good-natured comic women made her a memorable and beloved presence across the screen comedies of the Golden Age. Esther Howard was a beloved character actress whose blowsy, brassy, warm-hearted comic women, forever a little dizzy and a little worse for wear, made her a memorable and delightful presence in a great many films across the 1930s and 1940s, a performer who specialized in playing good-natured landladies, faded showgirls, tipsy barflies, and blowsy good-time women with a wonderful warmth and comic flair. She was born in Montana in 1892, and she came up through the theater, becoming an accomplished stage actress before bringing her considerable comic gifts to Hollywood, where her ample figure, her expressive face, and her gift for playing warm, brassy, slightly dissipated women made her a natural for a particular and beloved kind of comic role. She had a genius for playing good-hearted, blowsy women who were forever a little dizzy, a little tipsy, and a little past their prime, but always warm and funny and human. The friendly landlady, the faded chorus girl, the good-time gal, the tipsy party guest. All played with a wonderful comic generosity that made audiences love them. She was especially memorable in the classic film noir Murder, My Sweet, in which she played a blowsy, drunken widow with such vivid, funny, and slightly pathetic humanity that the small role became unforgettable, a perfect distillation of her particular gift. She brought that same warm, brassy, dizzy energy to a great many other films, always the good-natured, blowsy woman who lit up the... She was one of those invaluable character players whose familiar face promised a moment of genuine comic pleasure. And in real life, Esther Howard was a seasoned and respected professional, a capable stage and screen actress whose genuine skill underlay her wonderful gallery of blowsy comic women, a warm and well-liked figure among her colleagues. Directors and audiences alike delighted in the warmth and the comic generosity she brought to even the smallest part, and across her long career, she became one of those cherished, familiar faces whose appearance in a film promised a moment of genuine good-natured pleasure. Whether playing a friendly landlady or a tipsy party guest, she filled her characters with such humanity that they lingered in the memory long after the film had ended. Esther Howard died in 1965 at 72 in California, having enjoyed a long career on stage and screen. She is buried in California. Her grave is quiet, and the beloved character actress, whose blowsy, brassy, gloriously good-natured comic women delighted audiences across the golden age of the screen, rests now largely forgotten, her warm comic flair and her memorable good-time gals remembered mainly by the devoted connoisseurs of classic character acting who still cherish her every delightful appearance. We travel now to honor a wonderful and prolific character actress whose tiny frame, sharp features, and gloriously eccentric spinsters and busybodies made her a memorable comic presence across decades of film and television. Almira Sessions was a beloved character actress whose small, angular frame, sharp features, and gift for playing eccentric, prim, gloriously peculiar spinsters, gossips, and busybodies made her one of the most distinctive and prolific character players in Hollywood. A performer who appeared in a truly enormous number of films and television programs across some 4 decades of steady work. She was born in Washington, D.C. in 1888, and she came from a prominent family before pursuing a career in show business, performing in vaudeville and on the stage, developing the sharp, eccentric, wonderfully peculiar comic persona that would sustain her long career. When she came to Hollywood, she found endless demand for her particular gifts, playing prim spinsters, nosy neighbors, eccentric townswomen, fussy clerks, and peculiar busybodies of every description, her sharp features and her distinctive delivery making even the smallest role memorable. She had a genius for the tiny, vivid comic cameo, appearing for a moment as some sharp-tongued gossip or peculiar spinster and stealing the scene with a single, well-delivered line or a wonderfully eccentric reaction. And directors valued her enormously for the specificity and the comic life she brought to every part. She appeared in a staggering number of classic films across the decades. From her early work all the way through the 1960s, a familiar and beloved face to generations of moviegoers, even when they did not know her name, and she brought that same eccentric comic energy to many popular television programs as the medium grew. Her prim, peculiar, gloriously eccentric women became a beloved fixture of the Golden Age, a reliable source of comic delight in film after film. And in real life, Almira Sessions was a cultured and dignified woman from a distinguished background, a seasoned and reliable professional whose genuine skill and versatility kept her in constant demand across a remarkably long career, warmly regarded by her many colleagues. Her remarkable career longevity, stretching across 4 full decades of constant work, was a genuine testament to her reliability, her versatility, and the endless comic life she brought to even the tiniest role, and she remained in demand right into the 1960s. A beloved, familiar presence across generations of film and television. Few character players ever worked so steadily or brought such vivid specificity to so many small and memorable parts. Almira Sessions died in 1974 at 85, in California, having worked steadily almost to the end of her long life. She is buried in California. Her grave is quiet, and the beloved character actress, whose sharp, eccentric, gloriously peculiar spinsters and busybodies delighted audiences across 4 decades of film and television, rests now largely forgotten. Her vivid comic cameos and her distinctive eccentric presence remembered mainly by the devoted connoisseurs of classic character acting who still delight in her every peculiar appearance. We travel now, for the final grave in our long journey, to honor a beloved and unforgettable character actress whose towering height and formidable presence made her a memorable comic figure across the golden age of film and television. Hope Emerson was a beloved character actress whose truly towering height, powerful build, and formidable presence made her one of the most instantly recognizable and memorable character players in Hollywood, a performer who used her remarkable stature to wonderful comic and dramatic effect across a busy career in film and television. She was born in Iowa in 1897, and she grew to an extraordinary height, standing well over 6 feet tall and possessing a powerful, commanding physical presence that set her apart from every other actress of her era. Rather than let this remarkable stature limit her, Hope Emerson made it the foundation of a distinctive and beloved career, beginning in vaudeville and on the Broadway stage, where her size and her genuine talent made her a memorable performer before bringing her formidable presence to Hollywood. She could play her towering size for comedy or for menace, and she did both brilliantly. She was a wonderful comic presence as formidable, imposing women, and she was genuinely frightening as the sadistic prison matron in the classic film Caged, a chilling dramatic performance that earned her an Academy Award nomination and proved the serious dramatic power beneath her comic gifts. But it was often in comedy that audiences most loved her towering frame, and her formidable manner, providing a wonderful comic contrast in film after film, and she brought that same memorable presence to popular television programs as the medium grew, becoming a familiar and beloved face on the small screen. She was especially remembered for her warm comic work on television, where her formidable presence and her genuine warmth made her a delightful and cherished performer. And in real life, Hope Emerson was, by every account, a warm, funny, gregarious, and thoroughly delightful woman, beloved by her colleagues for her good humor and her genuine kindness, a gentle and warm-hearted soul whose towering size and formidable screen presence concealed one of the friendliest natures in Hollywood, a fitting final example of the secret that has run through this entire journey. Across her busy career, she proved again and again that her remarkable stature was not a limitation but a gift, a distinctive presence she could turn to comedy or menace with equal skill, and audiences on both the big screen and the small one delighted in the memorable, larger-than-life women she brought so vividly to life. Behind that towering, formidable presence, everyone who worked with her knew was one of the warmest and most gregarious spirits in the whole business. Hope Emerson died in 1960 at 62. In California, her formidable talent stilled while she was still working. She is buried in Iowa, her home state. Her grave is quiet, and the beloved character actress, whose towering presence and formidable manner delighted and occasionally frightened audiences across the golden age of film and television, rests now largely forgotten in the Iowa earth where she began. Her memorable comic and dramatic presence and her genuine warmth remembered fondly by the devoted fans who still cherish the great character players of classic Hollywood. And so, our long journey among Hollywood's most lovably dizzy stars comes to an end. 50 of them now, across both parts, and every single one of them in on the same beautiful joke. They were the scatterbrains and the dizzy blondes, the fluttery ants and the screeching villains, the wisecracking dames and the muddled old witches. And behind almost every one of those foolish, funny, beloved characters stood a performer of real intelligence, real craft, and often real courage. John Hagen, elegant and refined, dubbing her own screech with her own lovely voice. Judy Holliday, a genuine genius, winning an Oscar for playing dumb and then outwitting a Senate committee by doing it again. Margaret Hamilton, the most frightening witch in the movies, spending her life gently reassuring frightened children that she was really very nice. Vivian Vance and Gail Storm, speaking bravely about struggles that others kept hidden. Every one of them understood the secret that audiences never quite grasped, that playing dizzy, playing foolish, playing frightening, and making a whole nation love you for it is one of the hardest and smartest and bravest things a performer can ever do. They gave us the fluttering hands and the warbling voices and the harebrained schemes and the glorious pratfalls and the cackling laughs, and they made us laugh until we cried. And most of them rest now in quiet graves the world rarely visits, or in no grave at all, their brilliant comic creations still delighting us in the films and the reruns, while their names slowly fade. What we can do, tonight and every night, is remember them, watch their films, say their names, laugh again at the dizzy, sweet, scatterbrained, gloriously funny characters they built with such enormous skill, and smile at the secret they all shared, that it takes a very clever, very gifted, and very warm-hearted person indeed to play the fool that beautifully. They made foolishness into an art. The least we can do is not forget where these brilliant, beloved clowns finally came to rest. Thank you for walking with me through both parts of this long journey. Rest well. And if you pass a cemetery in the coming week, and you have a moment, stop and read a name. Any name. Someone was loved, once, who is buried there. It costs us nothing. And it may be the only thing that keeps any of us from disappearing entirely. Good night, friends.